Audio Jungle.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. With me tonight, I have, thank you, Alan. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you.
So Alan is from LEMS. Brian will be joining us a little bit later. But this evening, what we're going to talk about is the termination process. How to terminate a trust, how, when, and where, and whose decision is it to terminate a trust. So let's start off with that. Let's start off with how do I decide or how do I know that I want to close a trust?
Yeah, Angela, the previous sessions that we've had, particularly with Brian, are, there's a number of reasons that create a bit of a push. That push at the moment generally isn't hard enough, but there's no doubt in our minds that push is going to get harder. And I think a lot of people are making the decision to say, I just don't want to close the trust. It's just something I don't want to get into. It's just going to take time. I just would rather dodge the bullet. And I think that's just generally where many people are sitting. They're sitting on the fence. But generally, you should know whether you need to close the trust. Firstly, the biggest reason to close it is you're not using it. A trust that's unused is a liability. It's becoming more of a liability just in terms of the government's draconian penalties that they're talking about imposing. They haven't done it yet, but we imagine fairly soon they will be imposing it on somebody. So it's a high priority on the government's agenda. This whole grey listing is a big thing, and you don't want to be the target, especially for something as innocuous as a trust that's just lingering, not being used. It seems as though it's an innocent thing lurking around, but you don't want to be the target of the government. The second thing is, the second reason you want to close it is it becomes a costly liability of administering. Over the years, these trusts have to be properly administered. They have to be closed out every month with a set of accounts, and it's just getting more and more difficult. And the longer trust that goes on for, that hasn't been administered properly, it just becomes harder to administer these things. So those are probably the two bigger reasons. The government wants it closed, and the longer this thing goes on for, you want it closed. And if you're not looking at using it, they just really are. There's very little benefit in keeping it. Historically, a lot of people thought that there were benefits in having a trust. There are very, very limited benefits to that. I think, as we know, maybe Brian will pop in later and just tell us a little bit more about that. But I think people have to become a lot more front-footed about getting these trusts closed down, just to try and dodge a bullet. We know it's coming. We're just not sure exactly when.
Is that when people, they call a trust dormant because it's not active anymore? However, it still actually is active and it still needs administration, as you say. Okay.
Yeah,
so that would be a good reason, right?
Well, yeah, and the concept of a dormant trust is a bit of a complex thing, because there's no such thing. A trust that hasn't been closed is a live trust, and I think your question's a good one. People think, well, my trust is dormant. What does dormant mean? You might not be trading through it. That doesn't make any difference. It's still a vehicle for passing money through. And that's why the government have got this on their radar. It's not like a company or an individual where these things are properly registered. The trust is a funny thing. So we need to get these things closed and not think that they're dormant and harmless.
Right. So there is really no such thing as a dormant trust until it's been terminated.
It's either live or it's closed.
Right. There's no in between. Okay.
Yeah,
so
correct.
Tell me, if I have more than one trust to close, what is the best way to do that? Or if I'm a trustee on more than one trust?
Yeah.
What is the procedure then?
Yeah. So Ange, there's probably two types of clients that we get. The one is a financial advisor. Somebody's got a book of clients, or as you say, one trustee who has done a whole lot of favors for his friends in the past and decided to be the guy who is a trustee or a trusted friend. And you now find yourself sitting with this liability of having multiple trusts. So we do have a number of clients like that. And then the other one is, the normal type of one where it's was a kind of one-hit wonder. We've had school trusts that were largely formed back in the early 90s. Those are largely one-hit wonders. And then just people like ourselves, where we were led to believe in the past, before the laws were changed and a lot of the loopholes were closed down, it was advantageous to have a trust. And then those are people with one trust. So, and maybe just to tell you a bit about both, if you've got one trust, we make it nice and easy. We've got a website which I can give to you at the end, but I'll just give you the link now. It's LEM Systems, LEM, and then the word systems.co.za. And on there, that's where you'll go and you'll see, I think it's fairly intuitive as to what to do. You click the link, you fill out a bit of information, and the next thing, there's a pack that lands on your lap, and the next morning you'll get a phone call from us. So as an individual, it's fairly easy. You just log onto the website, and you could do multiple trusts that way as well. But generally, we find our financial advisors with a book of trusts that they want to close. We've got somebody at the moment who's closing down 6 trusts with us. They don't want to go through the loop 6 times and have to pay 6 times for the trust to close down. So generally, the process then is just to get hold of us. I either sit with that financial advisor, just go through the process. There's kind of 16 questions of each trust which I need to understand. There's various permutations that sit together with understanding the scope of a trust. And then we put those into a spreadsheet, we upload it, and then all the packs go live.
Right.
Yeah, so that's if there's multiple trusts. But, we're not prescriptive. I think, our objective really is to get people comfortable. A lot of people, these things have been sitting, let's call it dormant, Ange, for a couple of years, and they've been just, delaying closing this thing down. They know they're not using it. Now they've got to deal with it. And it's really the elephant in the room. And it's something that's a grudge issue. It's not something you want to handle. You can't remember what it was all about. You can't remember what you've got, what you need. Give us a call.
And of course,
I would encourage individuals to give us a call on our website. Is my direct phone number. Give me a call. Ask the questions. My job is to get you comfortable.
Yes.
And our process really is to, let's call it, dig up the past. Let's go back and let's find out what you need. If there's missing documents, there's ways we can get around it. But but generally, the answer to your client, if it's a single client, easy just to log on, answer the questions, and you're going. And if you're a financial advisor, give us a call and we'll fill out a spreadsheet. It's easier. It's one upload, one payment, and then we get it off your hands.
Okay, because I think everybody's under the impression that you'll be filling out forms and trying to find documents and chasing paper trails and all of that. So you guys really streamline the process and make it easy for people.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest fear. I mean, I think there's nothing more odious than filling out a form. I think we all hate that. And really, that's why what we've developed is an upfront process geared for trusts, so the people that don't understand them properly. And then effectively what we do from there, unfortunately, we can't close a trust down without the participation from the trustee. So there is some engagement that's required. But we do what I call a mail merge on steroids. Once we've got the information, we put together all the information that's relevant to your particular trust. That all comes out, all printed, done, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And it's just a matter of just getting a couple of signatures and then getting them into our portal. And then once that's done, the paper chase is over for our clients. And that's the idea, to get that paper chase over and done with as soon as we can.
And how long do you think it takes? I know it's hard to tell because you're relying on the master's office and all of those lovely. But from start to finish, I mean, I think as we just chatted about earlier before this, it's taking quicker than you thought it would.
Yeah, there's a general perception out there that the master's office and these government departments are not as organized as they should be, and possibly there is some truth in that. But our experience has been nothing less than impressive. It's taken longer than we've anticipated. Well, not as long as we've anticipated, but it's still a lengthy process. It shouldn't be taking as long as it does. But if we break it down
Okay.
and into time, um, the first thing I say to our trustee who's embarking on the process is, these things are like speed bumps. You've got a couple of things to do. Hit them hard and hit them fast. Get it done. Get over them, and then it's
Yeah.
out the way. We've had a trustee the other day who got all his paperwork together, and he had a complicated trust with quite a few pieces of legislation he had to get through. He did it all in 3 days. So he had everything done in 3 days, ready to go. So the first step of the process can take anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks. We don't like it to go longer than 2 weeks because that's dragging it out longer than it needs to be. But we do have a process that prompts you, it pushes you along. We also get on the phone. We catch up with you if it's not being as quick as we'd like it to be. But that first step of your data and form collection, signature collection, is let's call it a week.
Okay.
So that's the first part. That then comes into our portal, and then we then put the pack together. We put the cover letters together. We get the couriers to get through to the master's office. That's the second step. That generally we find takes between 2 and 2.5 months. We then get a revert. They're not nitpicking. Look, we do know the rules. We do know that the caliber of person who works in the master's office. We know that they run their fingers along the back of the form, feeling for originals. They do that type of thing. But we're ready for that. So we just haven't had a revert yet. They just generally stamp everything, come straight back to us. So that's 2.5 months. And then SARS, it's just really about getting an appointment. My next appointment with SARS on the 6th of August. I generally get an appointment within a month. And then if there's nothing really outstanding there, if the trust is registered with SARS and does need to be closed at SARS, that can be a month as well.
I think it's safe to say that in South Africa, SARS is probably the best government department that works the hardest for us, doesn't it?
No, it's all about collecting the money. They make sure that one works.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, and it is a slick process generally. They do battle with exceptions, and that's why we try and make sure that our pack goes in clean. Because as soon as you get a revert, they really the problems can start.
Yeah. And tell me about how do you help people, or how can you help in tracing documents that we now can't find?
Yeah, look, and I think the master's office is generally not unreasonable. So their ears work. They're prepared to listen. They have, there's a bit of case law that's been set around how to handle these things. For instance, trustees that have to have original signatures on documents. Some of them are deceased. A lot of them have immigrated. School trusts are always interesting. The board dissolved decades ago. The people can't be traced. These things happen. So when we say you need an original letters of authority, as an example, there's a way around it if it's lost. If there's a set of trustees that have to sign a resolution, and one of the trustees is not around, there's a way around it. They're not averse to listening and understanding. They want this trust closed as much as we do. They've got their target set for them. It's in their interest to close it. If they can close their trust down with something that's reasonable, they will. Yes.
Yeah. Because everybody's after the same goal here.
Correct, exactly that.
And people pass away, we all know that. So
well, that's right. They are a little bit hesitant. Obviously, trusts have developed a reputation for being a terrorism vehicle. So it is incumbent on them to make sure that these things are closed properly, that there's nothing still in them, that they've been closed with all the necessary checks and balances. So, but if it looks like you know, you've got your ducks in a row, you've got whatever backup stuff they ask for, it's not too arduous.
Here's an interesting question from one of our viewers. What if the trustees have all disappeared and I'm the last man standing? Which is similar to people that are deceased. How do we then, I suppose then you have to approach the master's office and ask for assistance. And do you guys do that on behalf of your clients?
Yeah. So, and that's one example. You know, we had a school trust with almost exactly that. The trustees were mostly around still, but were completely disinterested. They just left this thing with this poor only guy who understood that he was liable, and they didn't understand their liability. But you know, there's affidavits, there's all sorts of mechanisms that you can follow. You know, if you go and swear under oath for various things that you can't find, and it's within reason, there's a way around all of it.
Right, absolutely. So the process of closing down a trust, and I know that we've spoken about your systems, and basically to start, go online, make contact, and you will help people through the process step by step. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's right. You know, I think probably it's worth saying that there are 4 critical documents that we need up front, that we need to understand. You know, there's a certified copy of a trust in whichever form. Lost is also a form.
Okay.
Then there's the original letters of authority. A lot of people don't know what that is, but it's really a cover page to the trust. So you need that, and then, you know, depending as to the scope of the trust, does it have a bank account? Did it have a bank account? And where are you with that bank account? There's certain elements that have to be dealt with and provided for with regards to that. And then, is the trust registered with SARS? You know, those are the 4 main elements that really create the scope of the complexity or the simplicity of the trust. So, but effectively, you know, I would suggest anybody who's in 2 minds, give us a call. Let's have a chat. We'll talk it through. We understand this is generally a grudge process. As I say, this is not something you're excited about. You just want to get it behind you. So, you know, we're on the same page. We want to get it out of your way. We'll tell you how much work we think is required. And generally, as I say, there's no more than a week, generally. And then once we understand the nature of the trust, you know, is it registered with SARS? Does it have a bank account? What documents do you have, etc.? There's about 15 questions that I need to understand. But based on those 15 questions, I then have enough information to set you up. There's about 15 or 16 permutations as to what your pack could look like. But we do all the work in all the packs anyway. We put a quote together for you just on what that would cost, that particular pack. You have a look at it, you decide whether you want to proceed. If you do want to proceed, you know, again, we're reasonable as well. Not everything is in our hands. We haven't failed at a trust yet, closing a trust yet. But nevertheless, what we do, we take 50% payment up front just to help us with our costs. And then the balance of the payment is when all the other checks and balances are closed. And then once you've paid, we send you your pack of documents. And really, it's nothing more really than signing a couple of pages yourself, and collecting a couple of copies of signatures where you can or can't. But you know, you get your pack of documents, and there's a very comprehensive checklist on the front of that. I then ask you for 20 minutes of your time just to sit together to go through that pack, just to show you where you need to sign, things to watch out for. Please use a black pen. I don't know why, but you
Okay.
do.
Yes. Legal
Just
documents.
the little things, yeah. And then just to show you, we create your own bespoke web page where you scan and upload your documents as you get them. And that automatically electronically ticks them off with you and with us. So it creates a very visible and very easy process. The scanning and uploading is very simple. There's a little pigeonhole for every one of your forms that are particularly tailored to your trust.
Okay.
And then as they come in, it just flags me as it hits our back end. I have a look at them quickly, and then if they're acceptable, I accept them. If they're not accepted, we reject it with a reason. I'll pick up the phone, just have a chat through, but we haven't had any rejected yet. So they're not particularly complicated. So
Because
that's
you guys know what
generally,
you're doing.
yeah. Well,
So it
we've
seems.
learned by the school of hard knocks, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but once we've got them in the system, what we then do is we very quickly generate a cover letter to the master's office. Again, that is a bespoke letter to the master's office, telling the master in their legal speak all the things they like to hear, with a very nice, clear index on the front, header pages, all the documentation, all nicely laid out. We want to make it easy for them because we know if it's easy for them, it's easy for us. So we create a
Right.
very, very nice pack for them. Yeah, and we're immensely proud of our system. It's a highly automated piece of tech that we've created. It completely flows as a CRM should through from beginning to end. And then it kind of spits it out the other end. We've got couriers that are tailored to do the running backwards and forwards in the background. You don't need to see any of that. I keep you apprised of where we are in the process, that it is moving.
Okay.
And then, once it pops out the other end of our process, we generate a LM certificate just to say that all the boxes are ticked for that particular trust. There's a final payment due. We then just send your certificate to you, as well as your proof from the master's office with the stamps and SARS, if yours was registered with SARS, saying that that trust is now officially closed and you are no longer liable. And it's a big moment. And I think a lot of people don't see it as a big moment. People think it's just a paper chase. When you have the liability of, and for any of you who have looked at legislation that was promulgated just towards the back end of 2024, those are the draconian bits of legislation that can come at you. And they're going to exercise it, I've got no doubt. And we're not the only government in the world trying to close these trusts.
Right.
But anyway, you'll get proof, and we'll make sure that you're comfortable. But yeah, it's a process.
Absolutely.
You just got to give us a call. We'll lead you through it, and we'll make sure you come out the other end unscathed. Don't worry, this is what we do.
Okay, good to know. So can I ask a question? Is there a difference? Sorry, welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining us. Brian's on mute. Okay.
Is he?
There we go.
Welcome. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone. You can see that I'm a lot older than Alan because when I press the button and it doesn't work, then I go into panic mode.
That's when you call your daughter.
Yes. So, can I just ask a question? Is there a difference? So the deed of trust is different to a letter of authority?
Yeah, and let me give you my explanation. And Brian, who understands the legal speak, being in the trade of tax for decades, can maybe just give us a bit more. But effectively, the deed of trust really is it's the layout of what the intent of the trust was, and in there, for example, a school trust will say that. It'll define how many trustees there need to be on the board. The intent of the trust is to pay for education and not sport. The trustees may, if they move out of the province, they have to resign. So it really just lays out just the rules of the trust, what the intent of the trust is, who's in charge, who the beneficiaries are, just the scope of what the trust is. little bit of legal speak, but generally when you read your trust deed, it's fairly understandable. Generally put together by a lawyer, an attorney. And then the letters of authority is really, it's more like a cover page saying who the beneficiaries are, who the trustees are of that trust. So it's like a cover sheet that's overlaid the deed of trust. I don't know, Brian, whether there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, no, just one thing is the deed of trust is in reality is a contract, because it's a contract between the founder, the trustees, to act in a certain way for the benefit of the beneficiary. So it sets out all the rules relating to that. The letters of authority, those are important because until they're issued by the master, the trustees are powerless to do anything. So if you don't have a letter of authority, you can't open a bank account, you can't do anything for the trust. You need a piece of paper as proof that you actually are the trustee. If you don't have them, then no one, basically the trust is not operational. So those are probably, the trust deed is important, but the letter of authority is equally important because without that you can't really do much. So they're both very important pieces of paper. I think the other thing, just as a difference between a company and a trust. A company is incorporated. So what happens is that there's a Companies Act, and the company has got a body, or not really a body. It's a person. It's a separable person. A trust itself is not incorporated. It's formed in terms of the contract. It needs to be registered with the master, but everything that needs to be done by the trust has to be in that trust deed. So there isn't ancillary objectives that you can actually infer onto the trust. If it doesn't say it can do something, it can't. So if you'll notice that there'll be the trust deed will specify that the trustees can open up a bank account. It will specify that the trust, it basically sets out everything that a trust can do. If you leave it out, the trust in effect can't do it. So it's quite important to get an attorney to actually help to make sure that you put everything that you need in the trust deed.
Yeah, I think the name of the document is a fairly good descriptor. It's a letter of authority, and that's something that the master is fairly particular about. And again, we've got a way around it, but they want the original back because that is the letter of authority. So it gives you a license to do what you need to do as a trustee. So that's the one thing that they want an original for. But if you don't have it, talk to us. We've got a way around it.
Okay, so we've got some questions coming in. The first question, what are the potential legal risks if a trust is terminated incorrectly?
All right, I'm going to leave that one to Brian. Understands the legal tax stuff there.
I think it's what we have to look at is what is meant by terminated incorrectly. Now, what you could have is if you had assets, for instance, that were held as security by a third party, maybe a bank, and you dissipate and get rid of those assets, or what it might be movable property that is subject to some form of installment sale, and you sell it, and you try and sell you then try and sell or terminate the trust in order to avoid paying any, or either paying the installment back or in certain circumstances to try and avoid paying SARS. Now, the people who would be in trouble will be the trustees, because they act in a representative capacity for the trust, and they're representative taxpayers. So if they have dissipated their assets and they've done something wrong, so they've taken the money and they should have paid it over to SARS, for instance, and they haven't, SARS can, in the Tax Administration Act, they can come after the trustees and look to recover that amount. So I think the answer to the question is that basically when you terminate the trust must have nothing in it. And there must be no liabilities either real or contingent. So I think if you knowingly know that you're closing it to avoid a liability, then you're at risk. Otherwise, and I think that's the only time that you'd incorrectly terminate the trust is when you knowingly know there's a liability and you terminate it to avoid that liability. The trustees will be in
Yes.
trouble.
They will come and find you.
They will come and find you. It's there's nowhere to hide these days.
Right.
No, but I think the point is they'll come and find the trustee. The trustee might not be the one
Yes.
who's defrauded SARS, but
No,
they're the one who's liable.
Right.
what you often find, and there's a lot of case law on trusts, and they always, or most of them, is where somebody's done something to prejudice a class or a person or a specific beneficiary. That's when you see people get aggressive and start taking the trustees to court. So if you've got family members that you as trustees don't like, and you distribute everything to one part of the family and then get rid of the trust, the second part of the family who've been aggrieved might come and sue you. And that's happened quite often in law. You'll find that there's an aggrieved party that actually looks to recover or to sue the trustees for acting outside of their mandate, which is to the benefit of all beneficiaries.
Right. Okay. So let me ask this. Is the termination process different for different kinds of trusts? So a family trust versus a business trust or a school trust, is the termination process different?
I think that the complexity is different.
Right.
So if you, and I think Alan probably is, if you look, what you'll find is that when it comes to schools trusts or a business trust, by its nature will be more complex to terminate, because it would to actually to get the balance sheet clean, you'll have to sell off all its assets. You'd have to make sure that the distributions have gone to the right people. So they're just more complex to do, but the process is the same. What we found is in things like school trusts, you'll find that the trustees, the kids have left their school 10, 20 years ago, so the trustees could be anywhere. So it's just the complexity. They're not the people don't have, the trustees don't have as much of a vested interest in those type of trusts as they would in their own personal trusts. So I think it's
Right.
just easier to do a personal trust as opposed to either a business trust or a school's trust.
So the process is probably very similar, but there's many variables that change it
Yeah,
up.
it's just
Right.
you just might need to get more information. You'll have to get in order to get a clean set of financial statements must be a little bit more difficult in certain circumstances. So
Right.
it's just a lot more work if the more complex the transactions that have been taken place in the trust. So
Okay.
but the process is the same.
Yeah. So Alan, you did mention costs earlier.
Yeah,
Is there
and I think
a
that
standard, what kind of costs are we talking? And is everything upfront? Are there different costs for different complexities, shall we call them? How does that work?
yeah, and maybe just off the back of what Brian has just said about there being one process. There is only one process. But what we like to do is to make sure that we charge a fee for the service we provide. So if it's a relatively simple trust, it's a lot more inexpensive than for when it's a bit more complex. So, for example, a person who has got a trust that doesn't have a bank account and doesn't have it's not registered with SARS. The trust is, I think it's anywhere between 8,000 or 9,000 rand, around about there. And if it's more complicated, it ranges up to 13. So I would say, the cost of the trust is anywhere between 9,000 and 13,000. But for that, it's literally as we put everything in your hands that you need to do, and then we take it away, and then we only come back to you once it's done. But yeah, that's a rough guideline as to where the costs sit, Ange.
Okay, great. So here's a question from Tracy. How do we ensure that the closure complies fully with the Trust Property Control Act and relevant tax regulations?
Well, in respect, if you look at the Trust Property Control Act, that most of it is dealing with the responsibilities and duties of the trustees. So I think from a point of view of the trustees, they must have confidence that they've properly dissipated all or distributed all the assets to the beneficiaries, and it's done in accordance with the functioning of the trustee. So I think the trustees will know that they've cleared the trust out properly. With regard to the second part of the question, which was
the relevant tax regulations.
That from our point of view, what we generally do is get a statement of accounts and a tax clearance from the of the trust, just to ensure that all returns have been submitted and any outstanding taxes have been paid, because that you won't get it. The SARS won't terminate the trust unless it's actually cleared with them. So basically, from a SARS perspective, before you clear the trust, get a tax clearance, and the SARS will tell you that everything's okay from their perspective. So you just have to, all returns have to be submitted, and all amounts, all taxes have to have been paid.
So the tax clearance certificate, okay,
is a key.
Yes, absolutely. Can you guys help with that?
What normally the tax, whoever does their taxes will apply for the tax clearance online, so that we all ask for it, just so that we know that and if there's anything outstanding, we'll facilitate the completion of whatever needs to be done. But often in those regards, we'll have to work with either the trustees or their tax practitioner to actually get the stuff done.
Okay, that makes sense. On the back of that, are there tax implications for beneficiaries receiving assets upon trust termination?
There's always tax implications. There's never, because what happens is that if for instance there's a house, and if we just took an example and said there's a house in the trust, and you say, look, I'd rather have the house in my own name. So you transfer it and you transfer the house into the beneficiary's name and say you can have it. What happens is that on that transfer, there is a capital gains tax event that will happen, and the difference between the market value of the house and the base cost of that house will be subject to tax in the hands of the beneficiary. So there'll be capital gains tax in the hands of the beneficiary on the transfer of assets. So it really depends on what the asset is. So if it is shares, basically the same principle would apply. There'll be a capital gain on the distribution of that share to the beneficiary.
So do you think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about people, shall we say, moving assets out of a trust and then trying to terminate it without actually completing the process? Yes.
Yeah, what happens, what's quite neat is from a SARS perspective, if you distribute an asset to the beneficiary, the person who's liable for the tax is the beneficiary.
Right.
So you could terminate the trust. SARS are not going to be at a loss, because the beneficiary now will have the obligation to pay the taxes.
Okay.
Because I think there are checks and balances within the Income Tax Act to ensure that SARS doesn't lose out if there's any skullduggery.
Yes, so you can run, but you can't hide.
They've closed all of. There is if you look at the people often say, look, if you do tax properly, there's very little ways that you can avoid paying taxes. The acts are quite robust. If you move an asset from A to B, there's going to be a tax. So I think it's bank on paying tax. There's very few opportunities, if any, that you can avoid tax.
Absolutely. So Ellen, I know that we spoke about the process of termination and closure. What documentation or confirmation do you receive once the trust has been fully terminated? And does that come from you?
Yes, we look after all of that, all of the termination documentation. And again, it depends on the scope of that trust. In all instances, you'll get a LEM certificate from ourselves confirming that the task has been completed by us. The Master's Office are now starting to become more aware of who we are. So that carries a bit of weight. And then with that, we'll also give you the documents that we got. Because, for instance, for SARS to close a trust or deregister a trust, they need to know that the Master's Office have done their bit first. So
Okay.
in the instance of let's say somebody's got a trust that's got a bank account and it's registered with SARS, you'll get 3 certificates. You'll get one from SARS to say it's closed, one from the Master's Office, and then one from us that effectively says job complete.
Okay. So correct me, I was under the impression that all trusts had to be registered with SARS.
What
Why would you
happens?
why would you not be registered with SARS if you're a
What
trust?
I'll tell you what happened is people have set up, they've opened up a bank account, put 100 Rand into the bank account, started a trust, never did anything with it. So, and then spent 100 Rand. So basically, it's a dormant trust that's got nothing in it. It really it should never have been started in the first place. Now, technically, you're right. As soon as a trust is registered, you should register it for SARS. Um, if it's operational, but practically, if the trust has never had an asset, and it's never registered with anyone, and all we're doing is closing it down, there's no purpose in opening in going to SARS and registering it with the view of just closing it down. So once the master has killed the trust, there's nothing left to do. The trust has never earned any taxable income, so it's never done anything. So in no
All
circumstances,
right.
practically, we just don't do anything with SARS because there's nothing to be done. But you're right. All trusts, soon as it starts earning interest or doing anything, it needs to register for tax. So the rule is register for tax, but we do come across a lot of circumstances where people are delinquent in what they do, and we in those circumstances just terminate the trust and say, look, from a SARS perspective, you haven't lost out.
Okay. So I think let's recap a bit. So Brian, Alan and I had quite an in-depth discussion about the termination process, and I know that that has been streamlined on your website. So let's just go over once more, Alan, before we sign off. The process again, for there are some people that joined a little bit later, including Brian, but let's just go over the process about your website and the role that you play in the termination, and how are you going to make this easy for me?
Yeah, so let me just do a quick summary of it.
Okay.
If you are a bit uneasy about the process, generally you'll want to talk. Please phone us or pop us an email. Get in touch with us. We do have a high-tech piece of kit that is doing this work for us, but we are people type of people. We understand what it feels like going through this process. So what I suggest, if you're at all uneasy, please give us a call and let's have a chat. If you've got one trust just that you need to close, by all means, go to our website, which is LEM Systems, LEM systems.co.za, and then you just follow the process. It's intuitive. You get online, and as soon as you go through our payment gateway, you get your pack of documents. That automatically triggers me. I'll give you a call the next day anyway, just to lead you through the process as to how to take it from there. So that's really the engagement process. And then in all instances, you'll end up with a pack. That pack's got to be complete. There's a checklist that comes with it. And we are online, we're on WhatsApp, we're on the end of a phone. If there's any questions, we help you. We watch your portal from the back end. You upload any documents that have been signed and completed onto the front end. We chase you along a bit to make sure that you hit those speed bumps nice and fast. And then it's off your hands.
Yeah.
So that's really our mission, is to try and get this off your hands. And then we then sit with it for the next couple of months. We, in the background, we are talking to SARS, we are talking to the master's office, we're talking to our couriers. There's weekly conversations going on in the background. But you know, we take that completely away from you. The next time you hear from us is when one of the boxes has been ticked. It's either come out of the master's office or out of SARS, or both.
So it's as simple as that, it seems.
Yeah, I think and just one of the things as an accountant, what we like is recurring work to a large degree. So we do work. So if you do work on a monthly basis, generally there's an ongoing fee that you'll make. The problem is on these, we're killing things. It's a termination process. So it's basically a one-off, and I think that's where a lot of service providers are looking at it and saying, well, for them to do it once or even twice, it's a loss leader, because you've got to actually reinvent a lot of the processes, and to get the right documentation is imperative. Otherwise, something that will take 3 months will take a year. So that's is one of the stumbling blocks, or one of the reasons why these trusts are not being terminated. Because as an accountant, you look at it and say, well, it's the last thing I want to do. I'd rather do the work that I can do on a recurring basis. I'll just kick this to touch until I have to do it. Now,
and keep billing.
Well, this one doesn't make any sense, because it takes far more time than you want to expend on it, and people don't see value, because you basically are just killing something. So what we done is by reason of the fact that we're doing a lot of them, we can actually do them more efficiently, and once we've killed them, we've got another one coming through, like a pairs. Popping through, so we can, if you're concentrating on doing this, you can actually you can keep the information flow happening. And I think that's the key thing, is to make sure that you're talking to SARS and to the master's office, so that we can get the thing through, because as soon as you stop spinning the wheel, it stops, and then nothing happens for a year. And I think that's the key thing, is it really just takes what is really a painful task off the hands of lawyers and accountants, and say, look, we'll deal with that. You can look after your clients from a point of view of the day-to-day and monthly operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's good to know that you guys are there to help, because as we've spoken about in our 3 webinars, most people just simply do not know what to do. They don't know that it needs to be done, and they don't know how to do it. So yeah, in closing, I'm going to thank you for joining us all of these 3 evenings that we've spent together. And guys, contact LEMS, lemsystems.co.za, and they will help you with your trust termination. Thanks for joining us, and thank you everybody online for all the questions.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All
Pleasure.
Right,
nice to see you guys. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Angela for Business Sense. Cheers. Have a good evening.